Good evening, good evening. What they talking about, man? Whew, today gonna be a good one. I've been researching some information on this for the last 2 years. I actually was blessed and honored to be able to reach out to a guy by the name of David Thibodeau, message him on social media platform. He responded back. I'm very, very grateful for that. Very, very gracious for that. Just his time. Man's been through a lot. And he reached out and I let him know what I thought about the situation. And I was going to do something on it and talk on it because I think the events that happened on February 28th, 1993, and definitely April 19th are still going on today in some form or fashion. I know some people will say, well, that was just a Caucasian issue, or that was just some crazy religious radicals, freaks. That was a cult. And that's definitely not the case. Those were human beings. They were individuals. And this is a much bigger issue than people actually think it is. This issue has every dynamic in it as far as race, religious persecution, freedom, rights, and definitely the Second Amendment are guns, and which are all very, very heavily talked about in today's society. We just had a guy go in and shoot some people in Atlanta, and massage parlors are massage places, and that was wrong. I don't think he used a semi-automatic rifle, so I don't think it's getting as much love as it is. And on the other end of that, a man who got arrested being close to the vice president's house had an AR-15, 5 clips loaded, 30-round clips, and then they use words like 113 or 111 unregistered rounds. Well, there's no such thing as a registered round because only the box would have a number on it, a serial number. Bullets are manufactured, either remanufactured or new manufactured. And in the United States, there are restrictions and there are gun laws, but there is no limit to how many guns you can own, and there's no limit to how many bullets you own. And when you get these situations right now, as they're pressing for the dearmament of the United States and removal of the Second Amendment, then you get these terms where, well, this man had X amount of ammo. There's no limit. You can have 20 million rounds on you. There's no limit to how many guns, how many clips, magazines, rifles, suppressors, or anything that you want. So in doing this story, I did a lot of research. This is Clive Dahl's book. I'm going to show it to you. Journey to Waco. I read David Thibodeau's book about 6 times, but I didn't bring it with me today because the last couple of times I audio taped Gary Nestler's book and a few other things. This comes from a lot of hours watching the FLIR tape, listening to videos, listening to negotiations, listening to Wayne Martin's 911 call, a lot of YouTube, a lot of reading, and different interviews. And I didn't try to be biased because first, when you search this, it's kind of a one-sided narrative. So you really have to dig deep and kind of look at the different videos, and you get an honest video, and you get some honesty, and you get some things that kind of paint the light in a different way. Obviously, this topic about what happened in Waco fires up a lot of people, especially Second Amendment groups, militias, and some context it has been taken out of context by certain people to push certain agendas. Now, in saying this, I think David Thibodeau's book was very tremendous in laying out the groundwork. And let me clarify this if you don't know, he was not a Branch Davidian. David Koresh met him in Los Angeles at a store, and it really just happened to be by chance, by fate, that a guy from Maine would happen to be in that store as he was trying to go to school, trying to work. He was trying to be get in a band, and he happened to meet him there. They talked over the course of conversations, and David, coming back out to California, he rides out to Waco, and he begins to get some teaching, get some understanding. but he never fully commits, but he's there. He lived there. He moved out. He went to Q-Stick. David sensed that he needed to be around some equipment. He needed to kind of just enjoy himself. So he went and did that, comes back, goes to this traumatic event, and he's still able to keep his head up high. A lot of good source material is from Clive Doyle. His book was very tremendous. Now, I got Sheila Martin book on the way, When They Were Mine, and I love that title, The Wife and Mother, Branch Davidian, and I really want to get into her book because I think she has a lot to say, and obviously she lost her husband and some children in this incident. Now, I did not and could not bring myself to read all of Mark Bro's book because I think Mark Bro is kind of the starter of this incident. He's the instigator. He didn't like what David was preaching in the end with the New Light Revelation. Instead of him moving on, going to another church or going somewhere and getting a different message, he began to want to try to destroy David. And I think he is kind of at the forefront for bringing some of these issues up, which occurred and which ultimately led to men, women, and young children, unborn children's death. So let me get out there. Let me get that out there. Now, in saying what I want to say, I'm going to say David Koresh was not a saint, and he was at fault for a lot of issues. Obviously, from David Thibodeau's book, you can hold David responsible for the underage marriages and the underage relationships. The only difference between him and R. Kelly is probably R. Kelly had more money. One of the biggest key I think people need to take into consideration, even mentioning that, is that the ATF had no jurisdiction there. Secondly, the parents, the majority of parents gave consent. So if you can get in court and not embarrass folks, and you can get a child and a mother or parent to say they gave consent, I think David may have wiggled out of that. Not saying he's not guilty, because I have a daughter. She's 6 years old, and he wouldn't be getting my daughter. When he did the New Light Revelation, I don't even think I would have stayed. I would have came, visit, listened to the message, but he wouldn't have got my daughter. You're 18, 21, maybe, but no, not underage. But people agreed to that. So that's the only difference I see between him and R. Kelly is, he could have fought that in a way. He is at fault for not getting the paperwork. Again, people have assumptions about, I talked about this other video about suppressors and different things, excuse me. In the United States, it's not illegal to own fully automatic weapons. You just cannot own one made after 1986. The loophole to that is if you have your FFL, you have all your paperwork, and you have a gun store, you can actually manufacture or buy fully automatic weapons. They have to be registered to your store, and your store reserve, or whatever you want to call it, have to be registered to the store and in the inventory. And this is subject to search and seizure and checks by the ATF. So you can't take the gun home with you, but you can keep it in the store, and you can shoot it and show, well, I built the gun like this. It works in fully automatic. It'll work for you. But generally, you can purchase a fully automatic weapon made before 1986. So it's not illegal. David just didn't get the proper paperwork. Now, in reading and understanding this and breaking it down, first of all, we have to delve into the simple fact that David Koresh could have been taken. I mean, he talks about this even in the video. He has a video, and I know it's been cut up, but if you watch the entire video, he says, why y'all didn't take me when I was out jogging? I was out in town. But you come to my house, you point guns at my family, my kids, then, he's not having it. So the ATF made no intent to take David. And they have been watching this, they have been watching these people for a while. I mean, I got notes. When I get to these notes, I'm going to read them to you. But they have been watching these Branch Davidians for about a year and a half, 2 years. In the trial, which happened in San Antonio, which for the life of me, the difference between Clive and David's book, and when I say David, I'm mentioning Thibodeau, is Thibodeau thought the lawyers were terrible, which at the time, the Branch Davidians didn't have a lot of money. And a lot of these work pro bono, some volunteered. They were paid by other sources or other excuse me. Look, they were paid by other people. So you have to take that in consideration. But these lawyers were never rough, and they were never on attack. They were nothing like Johnny Cochran or F. Lee Bailey. They were nothing like a big-time lawyer, especially a defense attorney, outside of probably Dick DeGuerin and a few others. They just wasn't. And it proved to be one of the nails in the coffin for them in the court trial and the civil trial. David Thibodeau thinks the lawyers were bad. Clive thought they were good lawyers. They just didn't go on the attack. You see this light down here. That's my tablet. I got some notes, and I'm going to read some to you in a little bit about certain argument. All this stuff comes from different aspects. A lot of this comes from David Thibodeau book. So in a sense, Clive Doyle talks about how the lawyers caught them in several lies. He never pushed the issue, never pushed perjury, never put pressure on them to consistently lie and change their story up. That's something you have to look at too. He thought the lawyers celebrated was immature, and not only was they set up, the judge, who really wasn't on their side, a government employee, basically, and he even did the civil trial. I don't even understand how a genuine lawyer could not get a motion to have another judge hear the civil trial. And then the judge tells them that the jury is just going to make suggestions. They're not going to have a verdict. They're just going to make suggestions, and I will listen to it. If I disagree with it, I'm going to overrule it. And that's very clear how he felt about them in the sentencing, because pretty much the jury left and they should have been brought back so they can clarify some things. And you had a lot of people end up in jail that shouldn't have ended up in jail. So we can see right then why they call it the cover up in San Antonio. This whole thing reeks cover up. First of all, in my opinion, the ATF had David in the sight. They had a big bad story. They wanted to come out. This is all after Ruby Ridge. And they wanted to come out smelling like a bed of roses. I don't think they had any intent of bringing a lot of people out alive. First of all, they didn't bring a phone. They didn't even have emergency on standby. No first aid, no first responders, no EMRs, none of that. That's the first telltale sign that they did not want to bring it, because they had a knock warrant. They never knocked. And I think they were going in there, kill a bunch of men, come out with David, bring the women and children out, look like heroes. I don't think they ever had any intent on arresting them guys. You can see from the plan of their attack, all of this was done off information that was old. The two rooms they went to, David's room and where he kept the guns on the second floor, David had moved. So obviously they didn't have intel. Then you couple that with the fact that Robert Rodriguez goes over there, pretty much knows when he brings the article, regardless of how it's put, because I wasn't there, it was a sense of they knew they were coming. This man tries to stop them. From both books, it was dedicated from a lot of sources that he drove, went to the house where they was, and then he tried to stop them. They proceeded on. Now, I know the movie makes it seem like that the Branch Davidians were ready for war. I can't say that. Again, I wasn't there, but going off of David Thibodeau's book, you can see where they get some fire, they return fire. And I think, honestly, I think that's what happened. Now, whether it be they shot the dogs first, whether it be the shooting of the dog set the first shot off, whether it be officer tried to grab his gun going up the ladder, I'm more leaning towards the ATF set the first shot off. Obviously, we know they laid down a bunch of fire on the steel door because David was shot. How did he get shot? He had to get shot through the door. I think it's Perry Jones got shot through the door. Dick DeGuerin has a video, and he says they never found that door. After the fire, After everything that door went through, it wasn't aluminum, it was a metal, I think a steel door, a tough door that probably would have made it, never was recovered. So you have to understand, when you see these things, those are your red flags. Mike Schroeder was murdered. David Thibodeau says, I think he stayed out there 4 or 5 days. His body was not recovered. I think he got ate by a coyote. David also talked about the ants ate him up. And then finally, the Texas Rangers was able to come in and get him. Now, in my opinion, I think he was murdered. I think 3 men were coming across. I think they shot him, left him there, and finally, when they felt like, well, everything's washed away, they let the Texas Rangers get him. Now, if that's true or not, it feels like that. To me, it feels like, if you watch the movie, and I'm not saying this is accurate because the movie has the long miniseries or documentary series. I think it has 6 or 7 episodes. But in one particular episode, when the lawyers tell them that they're going to surrender, and they're going to surrender to the Texas Rangers, I think at that moment, the FBI knew, the heads knew, we got to get in front of this, because if the Texas Rangers get here, they get the evidence, it's going to incriminate a lot of us. It's going to make us look bad. It's going to show that everything they're talking about is true. Because you think about it, everything is burnt down. There was nothing left. Nothing left. It amazes me how nothing can be left, and you find all these guns that people say they never saw. You know, David Thibodeau says in his book how he hated the kick of an AR-15, the recoil. He shot it one time, he didn't like it. He even goes on to say that they gave him a gun. He had a gun when he was on watch at night during the siege, and he didn't want to carry no gun. He says that. He didn't want to walk around with a gun. And this is a man that survived in this onslaught. You know, and he says that. So it seems like to me in the story, David was really, people called him retarded and slow, but really he was brilliant in another way, which a lot of kids get accused of being autistic slow, but the way they learn is different. And it's the same way. It's the same way with you and me. If you see something you don't care about, you don't try to learn or pick up on it. But David, he was a carpenter. He could build. And once somebody really showed him about guns, he understood them and knew them. So it just seems like that not a lot of the Davinians really used guns. So they weren't walking around like a militia. They weren't really doing armed combat training. And that's what the government will say. Excuse me. A lot of things take place at Waco to let you know. Now, first of all, I'm going to read this. This comes out of David's book. Self-defense is backed up by the Texas Penal Code, which states the use of force to resist an arrest or search is justified if before the action or offense is restated, the peace officer uses or attempts to use greater force than necessary to make the arrest or search when and the degree the action believes the force is intimidating, immediate necessary to protect himself against the peace officer use or attempt of the use greater than necessary force. So again, right there, they had every right to defend themselves. Not saying that was right, but they did. Oh God. In March 1992, they had a camera set up on a pole by a nearby farmhouse. That's something to take note of too. So it's just a lot. And I got into this story because of what's going on now. And I know people feel like, well, like I say, this just called, they want a radical group. These people really tried to go out their way. If you didn't like them, they wouldn't bother you. They were very respectful. They didn't get into fights. They ran several businesses. They had a body shop. They had a lawn care service. When they was in Hawaii, they ran a bakery. They cooked, they sold, cleaned houses, build, help, work. They sustained. So they were not a problem in Waco area. They were contributors. So when you get down to the fact, you get down to Livingston Fagan, Winston Blake, Marjorie Thomas, Douglas Wayne Martin, Sheila Martin, their children, and a lot of other guys that were there and women were there from all over, a big melting pot. You start to see that this was a multifaceted, multi-ethnic group that believed what David was teaching. I know people say, well, he was just a cult leader, but when you think about it, Creflo Dollar has a following. T.D. Jakes, some other preachers that are very, very big, Jimmy Swagger, all these preachers have massive, huge followings. People that believe in their word, think that this is what they need. So it's not hard to see that David Koresh could have a following. He taught a certain way. People liked it. One thing about how he taught is he taught the Bible in a very distinctive way. And like I say, people liked it. So, excuse me. I got a lot of notes. And I'm going to go over and cover some of these things. At the highest of the high, I think Bill Clinton knew exactly what was going on. I think he'll play the game and he'll say it. And I watched a video yesterday before I did this today. And David Thibodeau, this is the first time I've seen him upset or get aggravated, because he was sitting next to Gary Nestler, and he was talking. I know he's like, this is not true, but he didn't say that. But he was in a video, and this was actually like maybe a year or so or after the documentary came out, and he was just adamant about how can you be so hypocritical of us being a religious cult, some religious freak, but yet you went on the plane to Epstein Island 28 times or so. So you can see his frustration. I can see Clive Doyle's frustration. These people just want justice. They just want the court and people to finally say to them that what happened was wrong. We was at fault. I mean, you had 6 hours from 6 a.m. just after 12:05, you had fire. Now, you have to take into context another point people make up, and this is just from the outside looking in. Well, they killed themselves. Well, oh man, we had people come out and they had accelerant on, they had fluid on, they were going to set themselves on fire. First of all, it's March now in Birmingham. Yesterday it was like 75, 80 degrees. Today it is 54 degrees. At nighttime, it gets cold. When they cut the power, and this is again coming from David Thibodeau and Clive Doyle, but David Thibodeau goes more in detail with it. It was viciously cold at night in Waco. You had decent weather in the daytime, but at nighttime, it would be 45, 32, 31, 49. You had a house, a building that was shot up. Okay. The first thing you got to take in context is that after everything got shot up, they tried to put potatoes to block, because the women complained about the air, the wind, or water coming in, the cold. So they put a bunch of potatoes up. That didn't work. One guy ended up taking potatoes and he was feeding the chickens. So they brought in hay. Ultimately, what did them in is Clive Doyle talks about after they cut off power, they went to the gymnasium to get supplies. They had 2 generators. They brought one in. From his point of view, he only remembers them using it one time, and that was to play music back. Secondly, they brought in a lot of sleeping bags. They had hay. They had a lot of fuel, a lot of ignition sources so they can keep warm. It was cold. It was very cold. So you have to take that into context and think about things. And even he says people had a lot of clothes because he says the day of April 19th, he had on somebody else's clothes. So can you imagine you sitting down and you're sitting next to a heater, you're sitting next to a kerosene lamp, and a tank comes through? What's going to happen? Fluid gets on you. You're going to either be in the fluid because you fell or got knocked over, or the fluid going to spatter on you. So the course of over 6 hours, this wasn't, well, we're going to poke a hole in and put some CS gas in here. No. If you watch the tape, the tanks were driving through the house. They went to certain locations on purpose. The FLIR tape shows you that they went to a location. I got this is a note from David Thibodeau, but the FLIR tape shows you that they went to certain locations and they drove to the vault, crushed the door, crushed the way out, and then they bust through there with their booms and basically killed a lot of women and children. But take this into account that they pumped in CS gas for 6 hours. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But, dude, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. They pump in this gas. And you can see on the FLIR tape, Jimmy Riddle was 32 years old, and it shows him trying to go out the back door of the cafeteria, and a tank runs over him, ripping off the right side of his torso. Stephen Henry, another young black man from Britain, also gets run over and his left leg sheared off at the hip by a tank. So they knew what they were. Now, about Jimmy Riddle got run over so violent that his rib cage broke a cat track. That's just how violent. Like, he got ran over so violent that it ripped his chest open and it broke a cat track. Do you understand how much force and power? We talking about a tank. Ain't nothing to play with, man. They knew what they was. They went in there to kill them. They didn't stick the booms through and put gas. They were shooting grenades. They were driving through the building. So yes, you're going to have flammable material on. You got hay, you got clothes, you got generators, you got heaters, you got kerosene lanterns, you got whatever you can do to stay warm with no power when it's cold at night. What do you think was going to happen? A couple of notes I want to show you about this CS gas that they used. On April 19th, it says they delivered 1,900 grams of CS chemical agent into our building, creating a concentration in some rooms almost 16 times the amount, or twice the density considered life-threatening. That's the most CS gas ever sprayed by the government on U.S. civilians. So Clive Doyle talk about they were supposed to do this spraying for 24 to 48 hours. And in 6 hours, they sprayed enough CS gas to wipe out an entire city block. Now, do you understand that? Okay. And this is another tidbit about just how serious what they were dealing with. Star, one of David's oldest daughters, was found with her spine bent backwards like a bow, into her head almost touched her feet. That's just how much these people were dealing with at the moment. These people were literally suffocating and dying. And a little girl her spine was bent. That's how powerful the stuff that they use to bring these people out with. Then they'll say, well, we care about the children. Well, you wouldn't let them sleep. You didn't want to give them any power. So you have to take into one thing. I'm going to say this again. This wasn't a normal hostage situation or a normal situation, because the Branch Davidians were home. They were at Mount Carmel. That's where they want to be. So you're not going to force me out of somewhere I want to be. And that's what they did. This was basically murder. This was murder in the umpteenth degree. I mean, your daughter is bent over backwards. Then they got the nerve to say that they killed each other. No. If you pay attention to the FLIR tape, I guarantee you Clive Dawes' daughter and all those folks that were shot, they got shot by the agents in the back of the building. Because if you cared about people getting out, it wouldn't matter what angle they come out. But when folks try to come out the back, you start shooting at them. That's because you wanted to kill them. You didn't want them to get out. You didn't want them to get out. You had no choice. The FLIR tape shows you that. I just don't understand. Oof, God, it gets me fired up. It gets me fired up. Oh my God, it gets me fired up. It gets me fired up. They lied to Janet Reno. I don't really think they even lied to Janet Reno, in my opinion. I think Janet Reno knew what was going to happen, and she just signed off on it. You know, they talk about they lied about the water report on April 13th, and April 15th was blocked out. And the FBI was given fire retardant pneumatic suits. Why would I need fire retardant pneumatic suit if I know ain't no fire going on? But yet I convince you that they killed themselves, but I got on a fire retardant suit. It's another point to take in, and let me say this right here. If you listen to Wayne Martin's 911 call, you can hear because he wasn't the sheriff, he was a lieutenant. You could hear him say, they still shooting. Oh, wow. Like he is in disbelief. That's how serious it was. And it's kind of funny how a judge, when they tried to do the Silver trial, made a statement to where the government has been withholding evidence. They've been withholding discovery. They won't turn it in on time. Anytime you don't have anything to hide, you're going to stand up, you're going to turn it in on time. But yet, when you call witnesses, you take away this opportunity. You won't let them use this. They can't use this. They can't cross-examine. I can't be a witness because I'm on trial. It shows you were trying to cover up something. Then you had pneumatic suits. You knew it was going to catch on fire. Why else would you get a pneumatic suit? The first thing about CS gas is it's flammable. You're not even supposed to use it inside. Like our government signed a treaty saying they wouldn't use this on other people. But yet we felt like we can use it on ourselves. Use it on these people. Whew. I mean, come on, man. I mean, come on. I'm going to give y'all a little bit of light. I mean, come on. You can see this. Clive Dawes talks about it, man. He talks about it. How they treated them. I mean, literally, he just tells you it's heartbreaking. One of the most heartbreaking and gut-wrenching things I think about is the emotion. We all talk about what we would do in a situation, but you don't know. You know, Clive Dawes made it out. His daughter didn't. There's a reason why. Clive was sick. He had been sick. So that morning, he was sick. He stayed in the cafeteria almost all day. I think he moved around a little. He wasn't in his right mind. He wasn't thinking. Wayne Martin, frustrated. Cannot in disbelief. It's a part with David Thibodeau and oh God. It's a part where David and Clive come together behind the petition in the chapel. They finna get ready to go out. They sitting there talking. Clive don't even realize David and two other men went out, not knowing that one guy jumped off the top of the chapel. And he says, all of a sudden he was looking and he felt some smoke. He felt the fire on top of him and the pressure put him to the ground. Because before, him and David was sitting there Wayne Martin and a few others come in, and Wayne Martin was maybe the last one. So it's 10 men. Wayne just slides down and sit, basically Indian style, sit on the floor, takes off his mask, and folks ask him, what do we do? And Wayne said, I think you ought to pray. If Wayne would have been focused or in his right mind, Clyde wouldn't have been sick. And maybe when him and David were conversating or thinking about going out, do we take a chance on jumping out? Do we take a chance on getting shot, getting run over by a tank? If somebody would have said, hey, let's grab hands and we all going out, or somebody gonna lead us out this hole, it may have been a different situation. But Clyde didn't even realize that David Thibodeau had already jumped out. You know, when Clyde jumped out, he didn't realize he was on fire till he looked and saw his jacket melting on him. His hands the skin was rolling off. He had to have some heavy skin graft. But he didn't realize that. It's just the emotion you going through this traumatic moment, and you already been basically isolated. You couldn't communicate. You've been cold at night. You've been fending for yourself. And then you have all this happen in a 6-hour period from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m., 12:05. So it just go to show you how sometimes, even though people are cool and level-headed, and David Thibodeau wasn't like a leader there. He was a guy there. They loved him. He knows a lot of people. And even in his book, he goes on to say that he probably would have went even if it wasn't for the opportunity to play in the band. And it did change his life. Him and David were good friends. And if you ever look at the picture with him and his mother after the trial, that was the best shape he was in his life. When you sitting around and he talked about he couldn't take them MREs no more. And I understand it was slimy. It was nasty. He was in the best shape of his life, not only mentally and physically. That trip really did something for him. Even Clive Dahl talks about like it was life changing when he came out there. He didn't really like people. He didn't talk to people, and David worked with him, and he got to understand people. He got to be a key cog at Mount Carmel. So if those guys, or maybe Wayne just would have said, man, let's go. All 10 of them men, they say 9 or 10. I'm going to take the high number and say 10 would have got out. But it's just the emotion. Clyde was sick. Because if Clyde wasn't sick, I guarantee you he would have got his daughter. And they probably would have went out earlier, before the fire. So you really can't say that. But he was sick. He wasn't feeling good. And like I say, you're not in your right mind. David Thibodeau was worried about Serenity. He wasn't really thinking he's worried about Michelle and Serenity. He's worried about everybody else. The kids trying to make sure they safe. Place coming in around you, smoke grenades coming in, you got propellants coming in, folks shooting at you. It's just a lot to take in. That's a tough memory. If you read these men's books, it's gut wrenching when they relive this 51-day siege, and especially February 28th and April 19th, and they could just tell you vividly what happened. It's just it's crazy, man. It literally is. These people lost friends and close people they were closely associated with. I mean, Livingston Fagan came out. Livingston Fagan is sent out by David, and a judge tells him he's a murdering, lying son of a bitch. Don't even know the man. And what's funny, as Clive Dahl said, they probably would have lynched him. It had been 50 or 100 years ago, because they was able to pick him out with a mask on, but couldn't say who the 2 other Caucasian men. Say 3 tall men shot at him. And Livingston Fagan ain't tall, but they picked him out, but they couldn't pick the Caucasian men out. That's crazy. He served time for nothing. A lot of these folks did time for nothing because that judge got rid of the jury and he made the determination, and no lawyer stepped up and said, hey, you can't do that. Every time they tried to have an appeal, it would always come back to him. I mean, that tells you they didn't want these folks to have any justice, and they still ain't got no justice. If you, it's 20 years old, it's almost pushing 30 years now. But if you can ever get a judge, ever get a jury to sit down and get the government to hand over evidence and hand over records and get real honest testimony, you would see what happened in Waco. Waco is very, very relevant. Waco is very relevant because the Branch Davidian Second Amendment rights, First Amendment infringe. They own guns. I said in the start of the video, there's no law on how many guns you can own. And even David Thibodeau mentioned this in his book. He said by Texas standards, they didn't even have enough. So what was the problem? David Koresh should have did the paperwork. I still hold David Koresh accountable for not getting the paperwork. He is definitely accountable for not sending all the children out and not sending all the pregnant mothers out. Because you had some babies that were inside the womb that were close to being conceived. So this is my happy place, guys. I love to do videos in my trucks. I get out here, it's quiet, nobody's around. I'm moving. I just moved. I have my new setup going in a little bit, but I just like to do videos here because it's quiet. Don't nobody bother me. But doing this process, this trial, you see, folks, like I said, I'm going through some notes right now, but David Thibodeau talks about how they were talking about it was a hostage situation, but no one made threats. No one set deadlines. No one made demands. It's so much stuff that they were talking about. Like I say, the vanishing of the Texas Rangers trying to get to the crime scene was impending. He says Mike was killed for Mike body was hanging for 10 days. His body was left hanging for 4 days until the Rangers were able to get his corpse released, and they went and got it. Coyotes chewed off one of his legs, and you can only imagine the feast that the fire ants and crows must have. So he was left out there, couldn't get him. Again, just so many different things you can look at. The ATF had all this great intel information, but at 8 a.m. on the morning of the raid, the room was clear. The gun room was clear, and they had took the guns to a gun show on that Sunday. That's something you need to look at too. So it's just a lot. I mean, it really is, man. David Koresh got a phone call. And he was talking to the guy that he was doing business with, and he called the ATF, and David said, "Hey, come on out here and look." But they never would. They would have still been alive right now. Right now, they would be alive if ATF went out there. They would be alive if David Koresh had the paperwork. They would be alive if the FBI showed any concern for life. I listened to a call, and this is a hostage negotiator talking to Steve Snyder. And I think he's talking about, I can't think of the guy's name. Oh God, I can't think of his name, but he died. And they wanted to take the body out, but the FBI negotiator wouldn't even let them take the body out. And Steve says, y'all talk about safety. You got men in tanks, men pointing guns at us, and we can't even take the body out. Like they had no concern for the loss of life inside the building. Finally, they let them get some bodies out. Finally, they let them get the guy out the water tower. They shot up the towers, and it killed Winston Blake. And then they had a guy in the actual tall water tower behind the house. He was shot. I think he got shot in the face or head, but they just had no concern. They didn't even want them to bury the dogs. Like they had no concern. The police went out there, not the police, but the FBI came in. They started running over the cars, tearing down the fence. And then you want me to negotiate with you, but you're tearing my stuff up. Like you're tearing my yard up. You're destroying evidence. And then you want me to talk to you. Guys in the tank flipping them off. They had one incident where the government tried to say that flashbangs don't hurt you. And they were throwing flashbang grenades at folks. When they brought a lady to the court, I think it was not a man, I think it was a lady. And she had got hit by one, and she was so badly hurt it almost ripped off her arm. And Clyde Doyle talks about that in his book, and they had to sew it back on, but she really didn't have no use of it. They were doing so many low down things, flipping them off, just causing up a stir, running over the yard. I mean, they just wanted to kill these folks for no reason. It just behooves you how they treated these people, the experience they had. One man was severely burned. Clyde was burnt enough where he got to go to Dallas to the burn ward and get treated. But one man was burnt, and they just put him in jail and wrapped him up. I mean, just no care whatsoever. No, nothing. Religious persecution, call these people a cult, a religious nut group. David followed them. You watch the video. You look at the video. Anybody could have left if they wanted to. A lot of them chose to stay because this was their home. This is where they had been living. This is where they had been working. David Thibodeau, I think he may have been there 3-4 years, 2 years before this happened. He was there when they first started building the Mount Carmel Center. That's something to take into account. They took a lot of old wood from old houses and was reusing it. So it wasn't the best wiring. It may not have been the top of the line fixtures. I don't even know if anybody makes mention of them having permits to do any of this. So he was there. These people didn't even have running water. They had running water going to the cafeteria. They were in the process of getting the running water going to the house for toilets, for showers, for all that. They had just got the pool done because they sent the older people, the older women, they sent them to live in the trailers because they can get hot showers, they can have running water, they can have all these amenities because they had not finished that yet. But these people loved it. So you're not going to get somebody that's used to being in the mud. You ain't gonna get them to come out. Like, they didn't have a 5-star restaurant. They didn't live, 5-star hotel. They didn't live in Greystone or Bel Air, Brentwood, Malibu, Manhattan, the rich side of Miami Gardens. They didn't stay there. They liked Mount Carmel, and you wasn't gonna get them out of there. So I don't understand it. It's been a long time. I just want to see them get the right verdicts, the right people get blamed. I want to see Janet Reno, Bill Clinton, the heads of the ATF, the heads of the FBI take responsibility. We knew something happened. We know something happened because Gary Nosler talks about in his book that after this, he didn't even realize folks from his group were going to counseling, and he had to go. It was several situations come up after this that the FBI made sweeping changes, and one of his superiors told him in a standoff that I'm not interested in ending this. I'm in no hurry to end it. And he even said that's very refreshing considering what he dealt with in Waco. So even he makes mention, if I would have had this, when nobody probably died in the Waco situation. So even he knows something was wrong. And he still takes the company high road, and that's what he want to do. But the FBI knew something was wrong because they made sweeping changes to program, to the parameters, to the guidelines, everything, the bylaws, all their structure. They made a total change because they knew they messed up. They got away with it, but they knew they messed up. I mean, when you watch the video and David Thibodeau says this man calls us religious fanatics, I mean, the nerve. And this is the first time I had ever seen him mad in any interview, anything. Like, he's always been calm, cool, laid back, easy going, kind of rock back in his chair like this and sit like this or sit with his hands on the side. He was hot then. And just to see a guy like Gary say, man, I had to go to counseling. I had to go to counseling. Like he was back, I think, in Virginia at the FBI headquarters. He said he had to turn the TV off. Like they knew it. They knew it. It was instant. And it's funny how, Clyde, when he jumps out the building, he remembers David saying something about you'll never get to reap what you sow because of what you plant. He didn't understand it. And then when he jumped out, he said, I see now. I see now, because everything was destroyed by the tanks. Or how David Thibodeau says that David said one day this front yard going to be covered up with tanks. How would he know that? Sometimes people do have premonitions. People speak in prophetic tongue. People know things. I'm not saying the man is good. I'm just saying he made a point. So I know in my heart it was a cover up. These people really didn't do anything wrong. They should have took David Koresh when he was running. They should have took him in the city. They wanted this. They wanted to come in. They wanted to shoot the place up because they had enough agents. When you have agents jump out of cattle trailers and they make, even though they had the shooting, they made it up to the second floor because they thought they were going to come out with some weapons. That's what you got to take into account, that even though you had a shootout, they still managed to crawl up, climb up, and go in because they felt like, well, we finna come out with some weapons. But they didn't, because the weapons were gone, the majority of them. So that just goes to show you. And then the FBI come in, and then they realize they got a situation. They handle it very aggressively instead of working with them, working against negotiation. And then you have grown men look them in the face and say, they're not coming out for you. They coming out with me. I'm bringing them out. And the Texas Rangers coming in and secure the scene. Then you look around, you say, we got to end this. We got to end it. And they did. And a lot of people lost their life because of selfishness. Not only selfishness, but negligence and government stepping over the power. Again, you can blame David Koresh. He's at fault for a lot of things, but he didn't cause this problem. Regardless of him getting the paperwork, regardless of what he done with the children, and he would have answered for that. It don't deserve having tanks run through a building, having tanks run through the walls, go to a certain part of the house and pump CS in, the tightest concentration. Then you got federal agents at the back shooting. And you can clearly see that the government tried to lie. It was specs. It was reflections. You watch the FLIR tape, it's clear as day. They were shooting. As a matter of fact, when you watch certain parts of the FLIR tape, it shows you the agents that had the reflective clothes on it. When they were standing still, you couldn't see them. And then when they started moving, you can see them. So, like I say, I feel sorry that guys like David Thibodeau, Clive Dahl had to go through this and survive. Livingston Fagan, obviously, a few other survivors. I'm sorry for Sheila Martin losing Wayne and Wayne Jr. and her daughters, Clive losing his daughter, David pretty much losing himself and his whole world, that whole center being destroyed, not only being destroyed, but then Clive don't even go there no more, as far as the last I've heard. And having David's monument and tree destroyed, I thought that was very wrong, because these people like David and they followed David. And regardless of what you think about them, they listened, they followed, and they were building something special. In my opinion, if this wouldn't happen, and maybe even if David went to jail or some form of fashion, he still would be very large today. Mount Carmel probably would be like a junior college. I don't think it'd be big as a college campus, but it'd be like a high school or junior college, because they were constantly getting people coming in, constantly getting donors. They were building. And I think he would have had a massive following now, a massive, massive following. But in all, it's just tragic that this event happened. And if we don't pay attention, it's going to happen again. Obviously, the Second Amendment is always a hot topic. Disarming the citizens. The militias are staying ready. The government's coming at you regardless of what side you're on, how you feel about COVID and certain things they do. So just pay attention. You don't want another Ruby Ridge. We don't want another Waco. Like I say, I appreciate David Thibodeau for even allowing me to pick a little bit and talk to him. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity. I got a couple of questions for him that's really not for anything but just my personal knowledge. And maybe he'll answer them, or maybe he'll reach back out. But man, your story is tremendous. I'm glad you're married. Continue to be a wonderful dad. Continue to do the things that you need to do, Clive. It's rough. I know you like the last of the dying breed, man. All y'all original students of David you and Sheila Martin and a few others is just dwindling down. I mean, Livingston Fagan's back in England. It's a lot. A lot of guys been deported. Canada, women gone. Some of the older women dying off. So it's definitely hard, but I know y'all will be okay. I didn't want to waste your time, but it's just my opinion on Waco. This video is about an hour long. If you like it, like and subscribe to the channel. Comment if you dislike it or not. But if we're not careful, another Waco is going to happen. And you just need to be prepared. Make sure you tell the people that you love them. And anytime something happen like this, we need to be at the forefront trying to be better. I hope we can be proactive and change instead of retroactive, and treat people with respect regardless to how they feel about their religious views or political views, or if they like guns or not, black or white. We all need to treat people good. If everybody live their life like the folks live their life at Mount Carmel, this world would truly be a better place.